Hello YouTube! Today in the Naughty Librarian, I am going over my favorite books of 2020. So 2020 was a year. We all went through it, we all know it had its problems, but I still managed to read a lot of really good books, and yeah, I just want to talk about them. This is like my top 10. My top 10 of the 130 something odd books I read in 2020. Read a lot of books, but I picked the top of the top. These are my faves. These aren't necessarily books that were released in 2020. They are all kinds of books released anytime. These are just books I happened to read in 2020 that I like a lot. 2 thumbs up, would read again. So here we go. In no particular order either. These are just the top 10. There's no order. It's just all of them are the best. I'm gonna start this off right with a surprising hit. It's sci-fi series. This is A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe by Alex White. It's the start of the Salvager series, and oh boy, did I love this series. I read the whole thing. It's a trilogy. It is fan-freaking-tastic, 5 stars. It's basically my favorite sci-fi trope. It is a crew of misfits, you know, saving the galaxy from things. For real, all you got to say is crew of misfits, and like I'm already in. And so that was like a big drawing factor here. And then I started reading it and I realized how layered and like cinematic this whole series is. It's fantastic. It's like really a book you can't, well, you can listen on audiobook, I think, but you can't do other stuff because it's so sweeping and the action scenes are so complex and like Michael Bay level action stuff where there's like explosions and guns everywhere and you're just like, what? But it's so complex and detailed in the book that if you're not focusing, you're gonna miss something. So it's weird. It's like seeing a movie action sequence written out on a page. Essentially, this misfit crew, they get together and then they find this ship, hence the big ship of the title. And it is a warship that was thought lost. And when they find it, they're like, uh-oh, this is the warship of all warships. Oh no, it could destroy the universe. Uh-oh. So they have to do something with it and defeat the bad guys because, by the way, yes, this is sci-fi, there's spaceships and stuff, but there's also space wizards. There's magic. People have magic and they do magical things as well as do space stuff. So it's kind of a cheater sci-fi and I'm obsessed with it. I would definitely read more stuff from Alex White. I'm not sure if the author has written other things besides this series, but this one is fantastic. I loved it. I read all 3 books. Next up, I have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I loved this book intensely. So fun. It's kind of dealing with brujeria, which is kind of like Latinx witchcraft stuff going on there. And in particular, we're following Yadriel, who is a trans boy, and kind of coming to terms with themselves and like where they see themselves in the world and also family acceptance. And so you have that whole narrative, but also magic. All Yadriel wants to be is a brujo. They basically, they can like, what's the word? Resurrect spirits. They can pull spirits to them and they can also send spirits to the afterlife. They are way cool. And Yadriel is all he wants to be is a brujo. Obviously there are things in the way of Yadriel achieving that, but I think the thing I liked most about Yadriel is that he never like gives up. He's always just like, does he have a chip on his shoulder? Like a little bit of a chip, but overall there's like a perseverance and a genuineness in Yadriel's character that I feel is like extra special. Also, Yadriel's arc does involve a love interest as well, which is super sweet. It's like, obviously you guys are in love, just kiss, but there's problems because he falls in love with the ghost. So touching would be hard, but anyway, it works out. Just go with it. I feel like I've gone all over the place in my review of this book, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it had really nice prose. I definitely want to read more things by Aiden Thomas. And yeah, this is debut, and it's a solid debut. I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend. kind of a surprise hit for me. I have The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. And I went into this book, which is, it's like a normal book size. I'm thinking, okay, it's like a normal narrative. And I open it and I'm like, oh no, it's a big poem. Oh my goodness, it's all written as a poem. And like some pages have like very little writing on it. And so I was like, oh man. This is 403 pages. And I read it in 2 hours. So when I say there's always not a lot of words on the page, like I meant it. I read it in 2 hours and it's 400 pages, but it was a fun 2 hours. We're following Michael, and he's a mixed race teen. He is Jamaican and Greek. So he's already kind of a child of two different worlds and trying to fit into both. And also he is coming out as queer, and that's a whole other thing he has to deal with. He's got a lot going on. And I think there's like a certain sensitivity here and a true understanding, since his own voices in the narrative, even if it is a poem, that conveys a depth of feeling that normally would take a whole narrative to do. And this author managed to do it in a book that takes you 2 hours to read. And I got such emotional depth of these characters and like how they interact with the world and how they see things going. It just, everything makes so much sense that I thought it was weird it was going to be a poem at first. And then I'm like, it really worked well in prose. Like, this works awesome. Like, I can't imagine it being a narrative anymore. Like, it's the perfect format for this story. Also, side note, Michael does actually find drag as a form of expression, and you know your girl loves her drag race. So that was like a key factor in me really wanting to pick up the book. So besides that though, there is some drag content, but it's really about a young man coming to terms with himself to himself. He's not trying to necessarily have other people accept him. I think he's trying to figure out who he is so he can accept himself. I don't know. It's really deep. It's really good, but it'll take you like a couple hours to read because it's a poem. But I definitely recommend. It's excellent. It's really, really good. Okay, so I'm going to start my little like Westerns block of these 10 favorite books of 2020 with Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. Absolutely fell in love with this book. I don't know what it was about 2020. Maybe it was just the bleak harshness of the world that really made me like resonate with Westerns really well. But like, I'll tell you right now, 3 of these 10 books are Westerns. I don't know. No one's more surprised than I am that I really got into Westerns this year. Like, I really liked them. And Dread Nation is frankly outstanding. It's like, I read this one, I think I was like 30% of the way through the book, and I immediately bought the second book. Like, I was like, need that. This is amazing. Dread Nation is kind of speculative fiction, essentially. This is happening during the Civil War in America, so the 1850s to 60s. And there was this big battle called Gettysburg. Most of my subscribers are from America, so you know about Gettysburg. But for my subscribers outside of America, that was like a big deciding battle of the Civil War. And at that battle, the dead just started getting back up. So whoopsie daisy, this is a zombie story now. It's interesting seeing how the world changes with the introduction of zombies in the Civil War era, because like, people have to invent things sooner than they actually were invented in the real world. Like, they had to invent basically cars a lot faster because zombies like to eat horses. So it's weird seeing how the world has changed in such a short period of time. And it affects everything. And like, who knows what the world would be like today if there's actually zombies? I don't know. We are following Jane and Catherine. They go to this school for girls of color. Basically, they are conscripted to go to like battle academies and learn how to fight zombies. And Jane and Catherine have their own struggles in the world. And part of it is about, their race and how people perceive them. That is part of it. And then you have a whole big chunk of it that's like zombie action adventure. And then you also have this really cool like B storyline with these 2 girls who are complete opposites, forming actually a really deep friendship and really understanding like another human who's not like you. They kind of start off as enemies, but by the end of the book, you're like, yeah, that's your best friend. Like, that is the person that's closest to you in the world. So there's a lot of ground this book covers, considering it's about Civil War zombies. And then there's a sequel to this book as well, and I read that too. Absolutely loved it. This is a stellar duology. I highly recommend. Please pick it up. It's so good. You will not be disappointed. I know some people are over zombies, but honestly, there's so much more going on in this book outside of zombies that, like, I really think you would dig it. So I'm recommending this highly. Western number 2 is The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. Honestly, kind of a surprise hit. I bought it because I'm like, oh, that looks kind of cool. And I went into it thinking, maybe it'll be like a 4-star read. It's a YA. And I was like, maybe it'll be good. And I started reading it. I'm like, oh shit, this is really good. 5 stars. Like, I was stunned in a good way. This is also a kind of a different take on a Western. It's definitely in the frontier of America, so the same kind of era of Dread Nation, except there aren't zombies here, but there are different type of like wraiths and spirits, so there are some like spooky magical shit also going on in this world. I like cheater Westerns maybe. I just like Westerns with a dash of magic. And we're following this group of 5 girls. They are called Good Luck Girls because they're essentially they are forced to work in a brothel. Like, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. It's forced prostitution, so there you go. It's kind of rough to start with. But of course, these girls are all in the same situation, and they've kind of grown up in this brothel because they buy them young, and so they take care of each other, and they have these deep friendships and stuff. And we're following these girls trying to get their freedom, and it all kind of starts one day when whoopsie daisy, one of the youngest members of this crew of girls, on her debut evening, kills the man who bought her time. So they're like, whoa, shit, we gotta go. So they run away. And what follows is kind of like a cat and mouse game. They are running away from authorities because, if they get caught, they're going straight back there and they're going to be punished severely. So they're literally running for their lives. And also finding like resistance members around the world and fighting like wraiths in the forest. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. But I think one of the big selling factors for the book is the friendship between these 5 girls, because they're very different, all of them completely different people, but they're sisters through circumstance, and they're so deeply bonded. Even characters who are complete opposites don't get along. At the end of the day, they're still sisters. You know what I mean? Like, you hate this person, but if someone else messes with them, you will mess that other person up. You know what I mean? I'm allowed to hate them, but you're not, kind of situation. So, I just loved it. It has great female friendships, wonderful world building. I loved it intensely. It's really, really good. I pre-ordered the next book of this series. It comes out in 2021. I think like in summer? I forget the exact date, but I've already pre-ordered it. I'm so in. I'm so excited for it. Last Western on my best of list is Red Country by Joe Abercrombie. Now, I think I'm the only person who says Red Country is their favorite Abercrombie book. I know, it's a weird thing to say. I don't think it is anyone's favorite but mine. This is part of the First Law world extended universe, so to speak. You have the original trilogy, and then you have 3 standalones, and then you have this next trilogy that's still coming out. So this is one of the standalones. And you know what? When I went into this, it was already kind of a recipe for things I like, because it's following my favorite character, Logan Ninefingers. That's not a spoiler, because there's literally a guy with 9 fingers on the cover, guys. Like, he's missing a finger. We all know this is Logan. So I was really excited because the last time we saw him, he was suspected to be dead. And you're like, whoop. Not dead, swinging a sword on the cover of this. Yes. In Red Country, we kind of start diverging from the other more common themes that we've seen in the books before, because now we're going into the frontier of this land and, expansion, finding frontier towns and mining operations. Industrialization is starting to really take root, and that is actually one of the biggest caveats of the new trilogy, because this starts off in a world of magic with wizards and fights of demons and stuff, and then like it gradually goes more and more to science and technology. So where does magic sit in a world that has been industrialized? So this book is kind of a turning point for the series, honestly. I will fight you. I really like this book. It's a wagon train type of story. So they're going towards the frontier. Our main characters are trying to recover their stolen brother and sister. They were gone for like something for business, and then the brother and sister were kidnapped and their farm burned down. Whole very much beginning of a Western revenge story. And so they're off. They're like, go find the brother and sister who were kidnapped because they're kids. Like, gotta go find them. So they get in this wagon train, and of course, there is a misfit crew in this wagon train. I love misfit crews, and also peril and danger and just all kinds of craziness. There's nothing to protect you. You're on the frontier. If you get hurt, there's no one around. Like, you're screwed. So I feel like the stakes are very high, and I just really like the cast of characters. I like the new world building in this, and overall, it's just not my favorite character. Like, of course I'm gonna like it. I like so much of this story. It's just built for me to like, basically. And I know not everyone else likes it, but I love it. So I said what I said, okay? It's my fave. I had to put White Fox by Sarah Faring on this list. So the thing with Sarah Faring is that I think most people are either gonna really love her writing style or you're not gonna like it at all. I haven't found anyone who's kind of like meh about it, who could take it or leave it. You either love it or you hate it. It's kind of divisive. I fall far, far into the loving end. I love Sarah Faring as an author. This is her sophomore release. Her first book was A 10th Girl, hotly contested. People either loved the big twist at the end of that or they hate it. I liked it. After 10th Girl, as soon as I saw this was coming out, this was pre-ordered months in advance. I needed it. Both books are standalones. It's not a continuation. I just saw Sarah Faring. I'm like, yep, I'm gonna buy that. Auto-buy author for me. Love this. Love it so much. This one in particular, we're following these two sisters, and they've grown up in this world where their parents were very, very famous, and her mother was like the most famous movie star and beautiful starlet who's ever existed. She was like the modern Marilyn Monroe, and then one day disappeared without a trace. No one's ever found her. So she's now a mystery forever. Like, her popularity will never die. She's a mystery. What happened to her? And so these two little girls at the center of this grow up without a mother. And they're both kind of dealing with that trauma in different ways. One sister becomes more and more like her starlet mother. The other sister becomes more and more bitter and distrustful. But they kind of complement each other in interesting ways. And then something happens and they have to go back to their childhood home. And from there, they start finding clues about what happened to their mother. Who was their mother really? Like, she's obviously not the myth everyone has made her to be. What was the real story about what happened? So what follows is kind of a murder mystery with unreliable narrators and people who are keeping secrets and just like strange, bizarre, dark stuff. And I just love it intensely. It's so good. I'll say it's a bit of a slow burn. I wouldn't say this is like action-packed or they're running away and they're in peril. There are some like perilous moments, but I wouldn't say it's like an action-adventure. It's definitely more of a thoughts and feelings book. It's very murky, I would say, and that's like a good way to describe it. It's a murky book about feelings, and I love it intensely. Murder mystery. Please read it. I don't know. People either love or hate Sarah Faring's writing. I love it. I hope you do too. It's really good. I absolutely adored The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Loved it intensely. V.E. Schwab is obviously a very talented author, but some of her books have been a bit hit or miss for me. Like, there's some things I'm like, yes, I recognize this is good, but it's not like good for me. And this one, I was like, ooh, I don't know. It's a standalone. Who knows if I'm gonna like this one? And like from page 1, word 1, I was like, yep, this is dope. Like the writing immediately resonates and I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this. Isn't that the best feeling when you open a book and you start reading page 1 and you're just like, yes. And you're just like, this is gonna be so good, and you're just so excited to turn every page. And that was my reading experience. I was so excited to keep turning pages in this. Like, I couldn't stop reading it, and it's so freaking good. I love it. So we're following the titular Addie LaRue. She is a young woman in 1700s France, And, 1700s weren't the best time for ladies. She is basically, she's Beauty and the Beast and all over her French provincial town. She wants more than this provincial life. And so she runs away one night from her own marriage that she's being forced into. And here's the deal. There are gods in this book that she knows of. And they're like, hey, don't pray to the ones who are going to answer you after dark. They're up to no good. However, she's desperate. Does it anyway. God answers her. So this guy shows up and he's like, hey, sup, heard you calling. And she's like, I don't want to do this. I want freedom. I want to have time and freedom to enjoy my life in the world. And he's like, done. And she's like, what? And it's like the monkey paw situation where she got exactly what she wished for. However, her terms weren't specific enough. So now she's immortal. She has all the time she could ever want. And freedom, because everyone she meets is destined to immediately forget her the second they turn away. So if she's with you all night and you're having conversation and you're like looking at her regularly every few seconds and stuff, you're gonna remember her all night. You fall asleep the next morning, you don't know her anymore. Or sometimes if you just turn the corner, she's erased from your brain. She has no way of ever leaving any type of mark on the world because that's true freedom. So what follows is a very long story of Addie's life. This is like 300 years of her existing, going through a lot of major world events. And, being a girl on her own is not easy by any means. And then now we're in the modern day. I think takes place in 2014. And one day she's at a bookstore and she meets this guy who actually remembers her. Dun, dun, dun. So now, hey, things are afoot. So she is definitely trying to figure out a way to circumvent this curse. But I think one of the most interesting aspects of this book, besides, the beautiful storytelling and how well it's written, is her interesting relationship with Luke. Now, Luke is the name she gives the god who answered after dark. He is like, an entity of darkness, essentially. And their relationship keeps intertwining again and again and again, in very different ways each time. And their relationship is so complex and well trodden that I was like just glued to the page every time they were interacting with each other. Because on the one hand, Addie hates this guy. The other hand, he's also the one person in the world who actually can ever understand her, because he's the only person who will ever remember her besides that one guy. Forget about that. And who's been around longer than she has. She's been around for 300 years. She has seen some shit. No one really gets it, and he's the only person who does, and he's also your worst enemy. So it's a complex relationship, and I was into it. The ending's a bit bittersweet, and people didn't like it sometimes, but I actually thought it was really, really poignant, and I think fit with Addie's character. So I loved this book intensely. I feel like I've been talking about it for like a really long time, but it's a really complex, twisty, turny story. I definitely recommend reading it. It's so good. You know what? For pure campy goodness, I'm gonna say House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas is making my top 10 list. Okay, whatever. I'm doing it, okay? This clocks in at a whopping 800 pages. It is quite long, but that's just Sarah J. Maas. I feel like all of her books are that long. It's her writing style. She overwrites. And it's like a style you either like or you don't, I kind of get into it when it's done well. And oh boy, like this one is an adult urban fantasy. There's this world, there's a lot of different magical creatures. Our main couple here is Bryce and Hunt. Bryce is a feisty single lady doing her best, living in the big city. And she also, has magical abilities and stuff, and she has questionable parentage, all the tropes we like of urban fantasy. And she's off, and of course, this big conspiracy of like world-ending proportions happens to be around this girl. And she really has to dig real deep and like find that inner reserve of bravery to overcome things. She reminds me a lot of Aiden from the Throne of Glass series, so if you like Throne of Glass, I think you would like this one. And then you have her love interest, Hunt. He is a disgraced angel, so, he's got his own stuff going on. And, I can't really get into all of the plot because, it's 800 pages, but, like, it's campy, delightful, urban fantasy, like, chef's kiss of urban fantasy. I loved it. I don't care. You know what? It's campy, and I liked how campy it was. It was fun for me to read. 800 pages that I did in 3 days. Like, that is fun, okay? So it made my list just because I devoured it. You know, I wasn't sure I was gonna put this one on the list, but after thinking about it, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia definitely had to be on the list, because this has just haunted me since I read it. Oh man, it is a lot of body horror. And like sometimes I just think about the gross things in this book. It just lives in my mind rent-free, the gross stuff in this book. Like I just think about it randomly. I'll just be like at work typing an email and it's like, oh gosh. Like it just hits me how gross some things were. Besides the whole body horror thing that I've gone on about, this is taking place in the 1950s in Mexico, and you know, to oversimplify things maybe, it is a horror story, like basically based on the concept of colonization, kind of like how Get Out is a horror story about cultural appropriation, kind of that idea. You have this really dope horror story, but it's also has like the metaphor there. We're following Noemi. She is kind of like a Hitchcock heroine, honestly. She's a little, you know, selfish and not the best person, but infinitely interesting. Kind of like a Tippi Hedren in The Birds, I would say. Not a great person, but fun to watch. So I would say that's very much kind of like Noemi. And she's going to this big English manor house in the middle of Mexico because these white folks came and literally built their house brick by brick, brought it over from England. They just planted a English manor in Mexico. Like, it's kind of an obvious metaphor for colonization, but she has to go over there because her cousin married one of the members of the family, and she's like, this cousin ain't right. Like, she's crazy. You're doing something to her. I need to get to the bottom of this. And oh boy, is this family just full of creeps. Just creepy weirdos. Creepy weirdos. Body horror ensues. And yeah, it's just kind of haunting, but it has so many like really cool tropes it plays with too. Like I was saying, it has the metaphor, and also, you know, it takes place in Mexico, which I thought was an interesting setting, especially in the 50s. And yeah, it kind of has Hitchcock vibes. So I thought it was really good. I enjoyed it. Also, it haunts me to this day. So I think just for haunting factors, it had to be on the list. The last book on my favorites of 2020 list is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. In fact, I actually read this whole trilogy this year, but I just picked the first book because, you know, I think the first book's still my favorite of the series. And it's really good. It was a book that, like, of course I'd heard about all the time, like on Bookstagram, and my friends have talked about it nonstop, and finally I was just like, okay, I'm going to read it. And it was, again, one of those books, like page one, word one, you're like, this is gonna be good. It's like immediately good, and you're so excited about it. So yeah, it kind of took me by surprise. Like I didn't know if this was gonna be just average adult fantasy, but oh boy, no, page one, word one, hit already. Our main character is Nahiri, and she is a dash of a con woman living in Cairo, Egypt. And she also has a bit of magical abilities. And then one day, she accidentally summons an ancient djinn warrior, whoopsie daisy, and he's like, lady, you coming with me? And she's like, oh shit. So she has to go with this guy named Dara. He's a djinn. He's got magic powers. Whoopsie daisy, she conjured him. And then like craziness ensues of a wild adventure. Basically, he has to take her to Devabad, which are where people with like djinn blood in their system, I don't know, they have djinn blood, they have magical abilities. You're either full-blooded, you're half-blooded, or you're a human. They all live in this land called Devabad. He's like, lady, you gotta go there because you got magic and shit. So it's also about the political structure of Devabad a bit, and they have these two brothers, Alizaid and Muntadir, who are, you know, the princes, and their relationship to Nahiri and also to each other are kind of central plot points. And these characters, like family dynamics and how they see the world, it's just chef's kiss. It's so complex, but not obvious. You know, it's showing, not telling, essentially. There's like a whole scenes where all this stuff is happening, but she's not telling you expressly every emotion they have, but you still know how they perceive it by how they're interacting with the world. So it's a rare talent to do that, and I love the writing. It's very lyrical, it flows, and I like that it was based on, you know, Eastern mythology. There's jinn. It's definitely based more around like Islamic culture, and I loved it. It's so good. It's so good. And one more thing that I just really liked about the series in general, her characters, Nahiri, Dara, Muntadir, Ali Zaid. You have all these characters, and she lets them be messy and flawed and doesn't try to cast a judgment on that. These characters just have flaws, and then that's, you know, and it colors how they perceive the world and how they interact with things. And I like that the characters are allowed to be messy. No one is like an archetype of a character. They're multiple things at once. I really liked the whole character dynamics and the struggle, the extended magical world. It's an excellent series. I read all 3 books this year. Fantastic. I loved them. But I went with book 1 in particular because page 1, word 1, I was in. I was sold. I loved it. I feel like this video is probably very long because when I start talking about books I really like, I don't shut up. I just keep going on and on and on. So to stop dragging this video out, those are just the top 10 of my favorites of 2020. Kind of hard to pick them because, you know, 2020, I read like 130s, I think 137 books. I don't remember the exact number right now, but it was like 130 something books. So this was narrowing it down quite a bit. But I picked all these books for different reasons, and I think there was a good mix of things, and all these are my top 10. I feel good about it after I picked them all. I'm like, yeah, this is right. Let me know in the comments down below, are any of my top 10 also in your top 10? Or what's a book that's not on my list that's definitely on your list? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I will see you guys soon. Bye!